going to tell you a story of broken people, beautiful people. He is so sorry about what he did to them, but there's nothing he can do. Remember that. Safety and pills, Sophie.
Daisy, Daisy, give me your answer too. I'm half crazy, all for the love of you. It won't be a stylish marriage, I can't afford a carriage, but you look sweet on the seat of a bicycle built for two.
That's how they sang it yesterday and pedaled their bikes the easy way. But now that the waltz has changed the swing, you need...
I think it's reductive to call the Walten Files just another analog horror at this point. What started as one of the hallmarks of VHS glitches and jump scares in internet media has grown into something so much more than the confines that genre tends to restrict itself to. And don't get me wrong, I love analog horror and the tropes that come with it. But Martin Paradise's series has evolved into something different, something new. And I say this at the top because I know that while this series has a massive fanbase of its own, justifiably so, it also has the problem of being confined by two things. Its initial ties to analog horror, and its initial ties to Five Nights at Freddy's. And it's kind of disappointing. Look, on the surface, yes, this looks like just your run-of-the-mill jump scare slop that was spawned out of FNAF. I'm not embarrassed that nearly a decade ago, I thought that same thing. Let's be honest, the series does wear its Scott Cawthon inspiration on its animatronic sleeve, but if you're like me and you're into that kind of thing, when you give it a chance, you find such a uniquely stylized series that worms your way into the back of your mind, tales of broken people, true moments of pure unsettling horror, some of the best animation in the space right now, and a harrowing look at humanity, monsters, life, and death. Hey, hi, hello, my name's Levin, and welcome to my channel where I talk about whatever I want. And today, I want to look at the Walten Files. But first, look, this isn't going to be the usual subscribe bit. This video is going to be dark as hell, and it feels weird to put the usual style bit in, so instead I'm just going to say, I'm trying to hit 500 subscribers, and I'd love to have you join us on the journey. If you like these styles of essays, or reviews of shows and stuff, you'll find something you'll like here. Alright, back to the essay. What is your relationship with death? I know, what a bold opening. But seriously, it all ends tonight. How do you feel? Are you prepared? Are you afraid? Do you think you know what happens next? And if you do, is it something you're necessarily looking forward to? Again, I know. Heavy questions right off the bat. What the fuck, Levin? Aren't you the silly slasher guy that doesn't want to talk about Haikyuu? Where'd all this come from? Truth be told, I'm intrigued by death. Okay, let me try to phrase that less like I'm a sociopath. I'm very interested about how us, humans, as a conscious species, think about, interact with, and deal with death. At the end of the day, it comes for us all. At the end of the day, no matter who we all get buried in the same dirt. Our physical forms will rot away. It's a very depressing but also fascinating train of thought. And I always find myself drawn towards media that explores that train of thought. It's why I'm so partial to ghost stories and existentialism, exploring beyond the physical, debating beyond the physical. And I know it sounds crazy, but it's because of all that I'm so partial to this series. The Walten Files is, as it itself said in that opening clip I used, a series about broken people, but beautiful people. The series' inciting incident is the death of one of the main character's two children. I personally split the series up into two halves, episodes 1 through 3, and then the rest of the show. I split these up because they're two distinct parts. Part 1 is analog. It uses that analog, static, and tape glitches to tell its story, while Part 2 is basically an animated show with its hauntingly beautiful paper puppet art style and a focus on narrative storytelling, albeit still with these abstract sequences. Okay, real quick, let me give you guys the cliff notes of the story. If you want a full breakdown, I recommend Aiden Does Things video on it. It'll be linked down below with my sources. He does a great job laying out the entire in-depth story of the whole show up to Cyberfun Tech, or Episode 4, including the ARG. Give it a watch if you haven't already, and also sub to Aiden because, they do great work and deserve it. Anyways, Jack Walten is a family man, married to Rosemary with his 3 children, Sophie, the oldest, Ed, the middle child and son, and Molly, the youngest daughter. He's a visionary in the business, working with his best friend, Felix Kranken, a well-meaning man who has a demon in the form of a bottle, in the 1960s to 70s. One night, Jack asks Felix to drive his 2 youngest children, Ed and Molly, there and home from a school dance. Felix gets drunk at the dance and decides to still drive the kids home, and ends up getting in a car accident, killing the 2. And, in some cruel joke, he survives. He buries the children and digs a grave for himself, but he can't bring himself to do it. He doesn't tell Jack, not for a while. I mean, why would he? Jack is his best friend, and the kids were 8 and 11. Not the type of action you just go around admitting. But he's haunted by it. Literally, as the children attach themselves to the doll that Felix brought home with him. Ed and Molly are somewhere in limbo. Wonderland, as it's called, inhabited by Bon, a psychotic, very large man that terrifies the 2 children, and has attached himself to the Bon animatronic, and has also committed his second life to murdering everyone involved with Bon's burgers. Why exactly? We don't know yet. That's the basic layman's understanding of the story and major plot points. Don't worry, there's a lot more, and I'll go more in depth as I see fit to look into the themes and for this essay, but just so we've got a baseline understanding, Bunny Robot is murdering a bunch of people, there are 2 dead kids, and Felix is just the worst. The newest episode of the Walten Files is called Faces of Grief. It's a brutal episode, honestly, not in gore or anything like that, it's just a gut punch. Really incredible writing, looking at the effects of losing one's children, and diving into the scarily realistic representations of grief. It's a very aptly named episode. The majority of the episode focuses on Rosemary Walten, and that's the reason she's my main subject in this essay. The episode is framed around a short film she made to help process her grief in canon, which, by the way, side note, it's just an incredible framing device. She sees herself as the sheep. Obviously, sheeps have been her self-insert for a while, considering Shaw the Sheep is her character that she created and later ends up possessing. Spoilers, by the way, but to be fair, we've known this since 2020. The film is narrated by her telling the story of how Ed and Molly died, and her feelings. She blames herself for trusting Felix to drive them home that night, and it's that guilt that doesn't go away and keeps her stuck in this grief. And to be fair, from her point of view, Felix's drinking wasn't a secret. Everybody around him knew about it. Susan Woodings and Charles Brooks, engineers for Bunny Smiles Inc. and close friends, even acknowledged that it was common gossip at the restaurant. And like I mentioned before, Felix and Jack were best friends. Felix was close enough that the Waltens' kids called him Uncle Felix. So of course, Rosemary believes she should have known they wouldn't be safe with him. She should have known he was irresponsible. Who would believe they'd be safe? How could she have been so blind? He's an evil man and it's her fault for trusting her children to the devil. Now you can see why this is flawed. Obviously, Felix, by all accounts, loved Ed and Molly, and it's perfectly reasonable to have expected him to be a responsible adult for them. I dare say it's not even just responsible, just a functioning human being for the night for their sake. But Rose can't blame Felix. Not fully. Don't get it twisted, she hates him. She does blame him, but the more she sinks into her depths, this depression, the less and less she blames the big bad wolf, and more she blames the sheep. It is not entirely explained the reason why she places so much blame on herself, but feeling responsible and guilty for someone close to yours death, especially when it's at the hands of a family friend, is a natural phenomenon. And it's also not hard to pick up on the details that she ends up blaming herself so much simply because she isn't seeing anybody else, especially not Felix. And the more she's left with just herself, and only herself, the more she sees only herself. And if you can see only yourself, when you're looking for someone to blame, that mirror looks kinda like the only answer. This is where I'd like to say hats off to the writers, obviously Martin, but also Cal Denigris, Eva C., Caroline Heck. Rose's spiral is heartbreakingly accurate, and it's because of them, and it's worth mentioning. Losing a child is by far one of the hardest things you can experience as a human being, by all research and accounts. A study from 2022 records a whopping 94% of parents who've lost a child carry enduring guilt, defined as guilt that will wave in and out for years and even decades in some cases. Yes, I did pull out multiple studies and sources for this video. That's what I'm doing here. Sources will be linked down below. That 2022 study specifically looks at mothers. Losing a child is already hard enough, but losing two on the same night is enough to drive literally anyone to the point of major depression. The phrase "gone too soon" doesn't even cut it. Ed and Molly, again, were 11 and 8. Death, as a concept, is usually tied to the elderly. You grow old, you die. But when a kid dies, it throws a nuke into that. It's one of the biggest tragedies of humanity, and unfortunately, it'll never be fully solved. We don't have a way to make sure 0 kids die. There's disease, freak accidents. It's a harsh reality. And yeah, being forced to acknowledge it, that is already scary and depressing. But when it's one of your own children? Rose, as shown in this episode, puts a lot of identity into being a mother. Her children are an extension of herself, what she loves most in the world. She would do anything for them, and so, predictably to us as the audience, grief doesn't just hit her, her whole world is literally shattered. She's struggling every step of the way, dissociating in the car, not being able to get up in the morning, saying goodnight to their empty rooms, and isolating herself to the artist rooms to be alone in a world she can control, as it's implied to be a coping mechanism. And through this all, she tries to lean on, and he tries to help her husband, Jack. And he tries his best to help her, but he has his own way of dealing with all of this. Jack Walten is immediately struck with anger. Even before he knows the kids are dead, he's screaming at Felix's empty house, pounding on the doors and windows, threatening him. Pretty justifiably, I think most of us would do that in this situation. But there's more to it, and how he processes the death. And it's most interesting through his conversations with Rose. Him and Rose meet in the parking lot of Bonds right before the opening day, and Rose talks about how she hates how quiet the house is without Ed and Molly. She asks if it ever goes away, and Jack says, of course it does. He then proceeds to tell a story about Molly losing a stuffed animal, and that's how they made Rocket, the gray rabbit doll Ed and Molly are currently possessing. He gives the conclusion of you have to cherish the memories and continue living your life. It's simple advice, but not easy, and not something that Jack is following himself. We see when he gets up in the morning, he still says good morning to Ed and Molly's quiet, empty bedroom. This scene got me more than it should have. First off, it's a great parallel to Rose, who says goodnight to the room. But Jack said the silence goes away, yet here he is putting himself in it. We're left to assume he's been doing it every morning since they passed away, and it's kind of a gut punch. And maybe this is because it just reminds me of my own dad, only grieving in private, but seeing it, just this one scene, is so intimate. So why is Jack lying? I mean, grieving together is often cited as one of the best ways to deal with a death. It's why people have wakes, funerals, and or celebrations of life. To have a group of people to be able to come together and share in that feeling together. Grief counseling support groups are also common practice for the same reason. Being able to see other people express their grief makes it easier to open up and express yours. Not in a relating way, but as a society, oh look, he said the thing, we set kind of an arbitrary set of rules on a person's grieving process. And being able to break out of those rules and not fear about being judged for it helps. Like, crying in public is frowned upon, though I will say much less nowadays than back in the 70s when this takes place. People on the street don't want to deal with your issues. You can't trauma dump on people. Grieving has become a very private thing, or you're being inconsiderate of others, or worse, doing it for attention. And look, that's just quite the unempathetic view of grief. I don't know. Stop dealing with your feelings, they make me uncomfortable. It's never really been something that I've personally been able to get behind. And now, no, I'm not suggesting you go trauma dump everywhere and involve a bunch of unwilling participants into your grieving process, because at the end of the day, people's consent still matters. But I do think on a larger scale, we should be getting more comfortable with allowing ourselves to ask for help when it comes to grief. And at the very least, if you're out at a Mackey's and someone's crying in the booth by the soda fountain, try to remember that they might be going through something very real. And it's the arbitrary rules that make Jack act the way he does. He can't grieve in public because everyone knows that you can't do that. That's being inconsiderate. Man, the 70s were a weird time. And on top of that, there's a lot of toxic masculinity. I know he said another thing. He's the man of the house, the protector. He's got work. Can't bring his dead kid baggage to work. That's not professional. Totally don't think about the fact that his kid's murderer is down the hall. So he lies to everyone, trying to guide his family through a trauma he himself hasn't even fully processed, hasn't allowed himself to process. And I don't know, we're already sidetracked enough, but that's super interesting to me from a character standpoint. Jack has been a character shrouded in mystery. He's the biggest mystery. He's usually the one behind most of the scares. So getting this look at him and he's just human, a guy in a time where he has to protect his wife and kids, and so through tragedy he tries to. He isn't that great at it, but he's trying to, and it's such an interesting way to take his character. He gets up in the morning and goes to do something. Unspecified. Rosemary says goodbye, saying she thought about the conversation they had, about trying to get back to living, but she can't do it alone. He promises Rosemary he'll be back by 6. He doesn't come home. Rose shatters. June 11th, 1974. And to put it into perspective, Ed and Molly died in May. It's been a month, and Rose has lost not only 2 children, but now her husband. Needless to say, that preparedness to try and get out, get back to living, get back to trying to continue on, is gone. Her dissociation just gets worse, and I use that term dissociation purposefully because she exhibits symptoms that seem to fit with the depersonalization disorder. Now, I'm not a doctor, so I'm not saying that is definitely what's being displayed or that's what they intended, but I think they wanted to show her dissociating as a way to show her trauma and depression. And I'm just wanting to point out that they did a damn good job exploring this without falling into several misinformed tropes, and actually did it really well informed. She starts dealing with severe memory loss, forgetting entire days, hallucinating dead kids, sneaking into her daughter's room in the middle of the night and calling herself a killer with creepy Rosemary smile. Look, Rosemary is gorgeous, but this is freaky. Her sister, or sister-in-law, offers to watch Sophie in an attempt to give Rose a break. which is the wrong thing to say to someone feeling totally alone who puts a lot of her sense of self into being a mother. Here, let me watch your kid, because you can't. Even if it is true, and it would probably end up helping her mentally. She doesn't want to hear it. Chris, this poor kid, talks to her and recommends therapy in a really great heart-to-heart scene, assuring her that she's not a bad mother or a bad person, that people care for her. And she insists she doesn't deserve to feel better. A lot to dump on a 19-year-old. Chris handles it way better than I would, and I'm even slightly older than him. When she gets home, she finds Sophie in the attic. Sophie, throughout everything, has been struggling. Not with the depression. She's been scared and unsure how to handle how everyone else is handling it. You see, in yet another instance of the writers are really well informed, Sophie doesn't have as big of an emotional response as her parents. As she puts it, she knows they're gone, she just doesn't feel like they are. Which could be a stage of denial. It's also interesting to note that all the spirits in this series interact with Sophie a lot, so it totally could be possible she just can genuinely feel Ed and Molly's spirits at this time. But that's going more into theory territory, I guess. However, she is still having a difficult time, especially with Rose's processing. She's scared and feeling alone. She doesn't have the same emotions to Ed and Molly's passing, and she's a kid, so it's totally reasonable that her emotions aren't quite to the same level that her parents are, but she's worried that there's something wrong with her because of that. And on top of that, having a front row seat to your mother's complete mental breakdown can't be that fun. So she's found somewhere to hide. In the attic, talking to angels and watching tapes of when her family was happy and whole. Rose isn't a big fan of watching herself when she was happy. She still thinks she doesn't deserve happiness and can't stand the memories, and tells Sophie to turn it off. Sophie refuses. The two start fighting, Rosemary getting increasingly more desperate to turn the film off, and Sophie trying to plead that it's the one thing not making her feel alone right now. And the scene ends with Sophie getting knocked in the head by the projector while trying to evade her mother. Rose stops. The sight of her child bleeding makes her stop, and for a second, we see what she views herself as. The big bad wolf. Rosemary's at the lowest she's ever been. All of this death and pain, and she blames herself for all of it. She put so much of herself into being a good mother, a good person, but after all this, she's completely broken. She can't find that good person anymore. And she finds her way to the lake to end it, plainly and simply. It's a direct reference to Ophelia. Driven into a pit of madness through grief, losing her sense of self, she throws herself into the lake, only to find a hand reaching for her at the bottom. A hand that I'm gonna choose to believe belongs to Ed and Molly, because of their faces being hidden in the lake right before the hand extends. She's in Wonderland. As the sheep again, notably not the wolf she sees herself as, making it undeniable that this is the children reaching out and not just a delusion. Ed and Molly approach her and hug her. She can't say anything but "I'm sorry." And Ed tells her, "It's alright. It wasn't your fault. You shouldn't be here. You're a good mother. You deserve a good life." I like this scene a lot. Me explaining it probably took longer than it is in the actual episode, but it's very cathartic, you know? We've only seen this woman tear herself down and refuse to listen to people, hallucinating as she goes to hell and back, trying to process all this tragedy she's a part of, and she's saved by the ones she'd do anything to get back. The only ones who matter to her at this point. And they tell her the words she needs to hear, but refuses to hear. Especially because we know what she's going to do when she gets to that lake. We know her intentions. This is where they said Ed and Molly died. This is where she hallucinated Jack earlier. This is where she was going to join them. And they tell her no. And she's brought back to reality. The detective who was in charge of Ed and Molly's case pulled her out of the river. Sophie had called the cops after Rose ran off to make sure her mother was safe. Unfortunately for the detective, Rosemary being awake means she's back to feeling all of the pain and hurt. And being reminded of Sophie, who she just hurt, probably isn't ideal for her right now, so one assault later and she gets placed in protective custody. Sophie is going to her aunts, who had offered to take her. Again, not great for Rose's mental spiral. Now she doesn't even have Sophie. She's no longer her mother. I mean, not actually, but in her head, yeah. She went from a bad mother to not a mother at all. And this is when the angel decides to approach. And before we get into all of that, I just want to talk about my feelings on Rose as a character one last time. Rose isn't a good person. She's neglectful to Sophie, who really just needs someone. She lashes out at people who are trying to help her and almost kills a guy. But she's also not a bad person. Because while a spiral doesn't exactly excuse lashing out in the ways she does, it does help people understand that it's not the greatest judgment of her character. She's clearly struggling, and grief is something we can all relate to on some level. Lashing out, acting on impulses, neglecting others, even the violence, it happens when you sink into a depression sometimes. And it's why mental health is so important. I made an offhanded joke last video about hurt people will hurt people. But the phrase is true. This episode has that as its thesis. What led Rose down this path is her hurt and pain, and while the things she does aren't things she should be doing, it's something that many viewers can recognize. The show promised us a story of broken people, beautiful people, and for a long time the only one we saw was Felix. Undeniably a scumbag, but he was my favorite character of the series because he just had such an interesting story. He's broken, but he's broken of his own making. Rosemary is broken, but not of her own doing, whether she believes it or not. She didn't kill Ed and Molly, she didn't make Jack go missing. Her fracturing is created by the circumstances of loss that follows her, and dedicating an hour-and-a-half episode to just watching this same character struggle is some character work you don't see all that often. And it makes me excited for the series moving forward, because that premise of broken people, beautiful people is what initially made me pick up the series. And I hope that we get episodes like this for characters like Sophie and Chris. With all that said, it's time to get to. Bon is a psychopath shrouded in mystery. A killer who enjoys death, but especially revels in rebirth. One of the big mysteries of the series is who is Bon? And at first I dedicated this entire part of the video to my theories of who he could be, and the various pieces of evidence in the show, and the implications of such, but I then came to the conclusion, it doesn't matter. As much as I love all the theories and the implications they have, Bon says it himself. It doesn't really matter who Bon was. The point is, this is who he is now. He accepted the death of his previous life, whatever it was, and has fully immersed himself into this new one, Bon the Killer Rabbit. I didn't bring it up in the last parts, but Bon has been there the entire time, like a somehow more psychotic Sam Reich. He can literally be seen by any keen-eyed viewer, hiding out and observing Rosemary. And technically it isn't confirmed, but considering he's hanging out in the attic window, I feel safe adding Sophie to the list of people he's watching, as it feels pretty obvious he's supposed to be that angel that Sophie mentions during her fight with Rose. Bon leads Rose out of the cell and into the back rooms of Bon's Burgers. We've known this sequence since the beginning of the series, but much like how we saw an extended version of Susan's death in episode 4, we get to see a nearly 20-minute scene of Rose's final conversation with Bon. It's no secret that Bond's conversations with his victims are some of the most interesting things in the series. Episode 4's Wonderland sequence still is one of my favorite scenes of all time, partly thanks to Eva's incredible performance, but also because of the ideas explored in it. Bond is just unsettling and sinister and manipulative. Bond and Rose sit across from each other. Rose, as explained in the previous part, is completely and utterly at the end of her mental rope. Bond has Rocket in his hands. He gives it to her. She starts reminiscing. Bond comes off strong. What would I do without you? Something interesting is that Rose is awfully calmed by Bond's presence. Bond, the animatronic, was designed by Rose, and she clearly attaches Jack to it on some level, because even before she was aware of all of the ghost stuff, she danced with it, imagining it was Jack on their wedding nights. I mean, then she got a Bond face, but I think it's worth pointing out her guard is immediately dropped by the sheer fact that it's Bond the dancing hare. And Bond's true motivations in this scene are up in the air. No one knows their true motivations. But something is here. Something sweet, something tender. Bond is gentle with Rose, talking to her sweetly, almost romantically, saying almost all of the words she wants to hear. Bond cares about Rosemary. Whether it's purely the parasocial attachment because she created Bond the animatronic that he possesses, or for deeper reasons. Eva, one of the main writers and Bond's VA, confirmed that the tenderness and care Bond shows here is real. And throughout the conversation, Rose seems to be more lucid than she's been that entire night, even calling out the fact that she's talking to rabbits like a crazy person. Unfortunately for her, though, Bond is very real. It's not a good feeling to lose control of your soul, your mind, your body. He empathizes with her, which is really weird because he feels like a straight up psychopath in other scenes, but he sees this pain she has and he wants to help her get rid of it. Make her beautiful. In her current state, she's falling apart, and Bond gives her an offer, one that reunites her with her kids, takes the pain away, and even lets herself be who she truly wants to be, the sheep. Though she probably meant it in a more metaphorical sense. Ed and Molly even talk to her to help with the handy-dandy sales pitch of "let me murder you." And it works. By the end of the scene, Rose is crying in Bond's arms, agreeing to do it, making him promise to take away the pain. Because, after all, what's the point of living when you're already dead? So let me take you back to that question from the beginning. What's your relationship with death? I don't know that anyone can ever fully figure out that relationship. But the Walten Files gives us arguments for it being both the end and the beginning. Rebirth. It's one of the core elements of the entire show's philosophy. It feels like a cop-out to say you can't figure out your relationship with death, because why ask a question you don't know the answer to? But death is just such an unknown. And so here, let me leave you with a question that can help you figure it out more. What would you do in Rosemary's shoes? If you were the victim of all this pain, all this loss, all this death, if you were at the end of your rope, would you take Bond's offer? Would you believe you could be reborn? Rose's death is so interesting because she agrees to die. Bond doesn't sneak up on her like he did Susan and Ashley, or he chase her down like Brian Stells. He sits there, face to face, and has her tell him to do it. Agree to it. Because he just wants her to feel protected, beautiful, loved. And in the end, I feel like a lot of us just want to feel that. But what do I know? Thank you guys so much for watching this video. The Walten Files is genuinely one of my favorite series of all time, and it was so fun to be able to write and dive into it. If you want to see more, please hit that like button to show me that you guys enjoyed it, and also comment, "He's been here the whole time." I think it'd be a very funny way to not only confuse new commenters, but also show me you made it all the way here. If you want to keep up with me, all of my links and socials are down below, as well as some cool articles I found about grief that I just think is super interesting. I don't know, go check them out. Also, on a serious note, to anyone who's seen my community tab or Twitter in the past few weeks, I'm happy to announce that my grandfather is okay and recovering from surgery well. Thank you for all the kind DMs I received. It means the world. Alright, that's all I wrote. Thanks for watching. Be good people.